Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey back in time. Not to the epic battles or the grand monuments, but to something much more fundamental: sleep. Picture yourself now, lying back, the soft glow of your screen fading, the world outside settling into a hushed stillness. You're about to close your eyes and drift into that familiar, restorative state. Now, imagine doing that without a memory foam mattress, without a blackout curtain, and definitely without a sleep tracking app. You probably wouldn't survive a single night, not without a lot of screaming. Anyway, the modern world has engineered almost every aspect of your slumber. But what if I told you that the people who came before us, the ancient civilizations we so often glorify, actually had it figured out? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're already subscribed, thank you. You're the best. Let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you in the comments below. It's always fun to see how our little community stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We'll begin our sleepy travels not with a fancy bed, but with a simple reed mat in the baking heat of the Nile River Valley. It's a hot night, and the air is thick with the scent of dust and river water. You're an ancient Egyptian, and you're settling down for a night of rest. This isn't just about closing your eyes, this is a ritual. A connection to the gods. You see, for the Egyptians, sleep was a fragile boundary between the living world and the realm of the divine. They believed that while you slept, your ka, your spirit double, could leave your body and wander the underworld. No pressure, right? Just a casual stroll through the land of the dead every night. This is a far cry from your Netflix queue. You lie on your mat, perhaps with a linen pillow, or more likely, a headrest made of wood or stone. Historians still argue whether these hard headrests were actually comfortable or just a way to protect intricate hairstyles from getting messed up during the night. I'm leaning towards the hair theory. Let's be real. A stone pillow sounds like a one-way ticket to a crick in your neck. Either way, this wasn't a pillow you sank into. It was a utilitarian device designed for elevation and airflow, keeping you cool in the stifling desert heat. You also have to contend with the pests. But we won't get into that. The Egyptians had some creative ways of dealing with bugs, including a ritual involving a special ointment. Let's just say a lot of their solutions involved crocodile dung, which you'd think would just attract more problems. But what do I know? Their sleep wasn't just about survival, it was deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs. You'd often find yourself sleeping inside your home, but sometimes you'd be on the roof to catch a breeze, staring up at a sky that was a canvas of constellations and deities. Egyptians had a detailed understanding of the night sky, and they used it to track time, even dividing the night into 12 hours based on the appearance of specific stars. You're not just looking at the stars, you're watching the passage of time. A celestial clock marking the hours until the sun god Ra begins his journey across the sky again. In your sleep, you might be visited by a god or a deceased relative. These dreams were not random neural firings, they were considered messages, prophecies, or even warnings. If you had a dream that was particularly disturbing or confusing, you'd go to a temple to have a priest interpret it for you. This was a whole profession, a specialist role dedicated to decoding the divine whispers of the night. Imagine that as a job description: professional dream decoder. Sounds way more interesting than professional email sorter, doesn't it? This practice of dream interpretation wasn't unique to them, though. We'll see it again and again as we continue our journey. For now, you're just trying to get some rest on your wooden headrest, under a sky that feels both infinite and intimately close, hoping your spirit double remembers the way back before sunrise. As the sun crests the horizon and your spirit double, hopefully, finds its way back to your body, we'll fast forward a few hundred miles east to a different cradle of civilization. The Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia. This is a land of ziggurats and cuneiform tablets. A place where the stars weren't just a clock, but a book of destiny. You're no longer a humble farmer on the Nile. You're an ancient Babylonian citizen. And your day is a mix of trade, temple rituals, and trying not to get into trouble with the king's law. When night falls, your focus shifts to something just as serious as any royal decree: your dreams. For the Babylonians, dreams were everything. They were the original nightly news, a direct feed from the gods. This wasn't a casual belief, it was a core part of their culture. A whole industry of interpretation. You might be lying on a mat on a mud brick floor. Maybe sharing the space with your whole family. But the darkness is filled with more than just the sounds of your sleeping neighbors. It's filled with potential omens. The Babylonians were obsessed with decoding these nightly messages. They were meticulous record keepers. And this passion extended to the subconscious. They wrote down their dreams on clay tablets using that wedge-shaped script we call cuneiform. A lot of these tablets, which we've since unearthed, are essentially ancient dream dictionaries. You might find a list of symbols, their meanings, and the appropriate actions to take. Dream about a river? That's probably a good sign. Dream about a dog? That's a little more ambiguous. Dream about your teeth falling out? That's a definite call to action, usually involving a trip to the temple for a ritual cleansing. It's like the first ever searchable database for your nocturnal adventures. But instead of using Google, you're just a quick walk away from a priest with a tablet and a serious face. This practice led to some seriously detailed cataloging. We have tablets that describe the meaning of seeing everything from a specific type of plant to a particular bird. Historians still argue whether these dream interpretations were truly prophetic or simply a form of psychological comfort. A way for people to find order in a chaotic world. Maybe it was both. A bad dream wasn't just a bad dream. It was a sign from a god who was either displeased with you or warning you of an impending disaster. In that context, a ritual to avert the misfortune was a form of proactive problem solving. No more just waking up, shaking it off, and getting on with your day. Your dreams had real-world consequences. Imagine you've had a truly awful dream. You wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. You can't just ignore it. You have to go find a professional interpreter. Someone who knows the sacred texts and the ancient lore. You describe your dream in detail. I saw a goat eating a brick of salt. The interpreter would consult their tablet, stroke their beard, and deliver a verdict. Maybe it means you're about to have a fruitful harvest. Or maybe it means a rival is plotting against you. It was a high-stakes game of symbolic messaging. This isn't just a quirky tidbit. It's a mainstream historical fact that showcases how deeply embedded sleep and dreaming were in their spiritual and daily lives. We've all had those weird, stress-filled dreams about showing up to work naked. But for them, that might have meant the god of trousers was displeased. One particularly quirky tidbit is the Babylonian belief that if you had a disturbing dream, you could perform a specific ritual to transfer the bad omen to someone else. Not a nice neighborly thing to do, but it speaks to how much they feared these nocturnal messages. You'd say a specific incantation and, boom, the bad luck was now your enemy's problem. You can almost hear the sigh of relief. This blend of meticulous record-keeping, deep religious belief, and a touch of magical thinking created a culture where the line between waking life and the dream world was thin and permeable. It was a world where your sleep wasn't just a passive state, but an active field of communication, a nightly conversation with the cosmos, where every symbol had a price and every omen a consequence. Leaving behind the clay tablets and cosmic dread of Mesopotamia, we drift west, across the rolling hills and turquoise seas, to the land of marble temples and philosophical debates, ancient Greece. Now you're no longer fearing a bad omen, you're hoping for a good one. For the Greeks, sleep wasn't just a state of rest, it was a pathway to healing. You see, these weren't people who just took an ibuprofen and hoped for the best. If you were sick, you went to a special kind of temple. Not for a doctor, but for a god, and you went there to sleep. These were the Asclepiae, the sacred sanctuaries dedicated to the god of medicine and healing. Asclepios. Imagine you're feeling unwell. Maybe it's a chronic cough or a mysterious ache in your leg that just won't go away. You've tried all the herbal remedies. Maybe even had a friend perform a local folk ritual. And nothing has worked. Your last hope is a pilgrimage to an Asclepian. You make the journey, perhaps traveling for days. And when you arrive, you go through a series of purification rituals. You bathe in the sacred springs, fast, and make an offering to the god. You are cleansed, both physically and spiritually, ready to receive a divine message. This is all just the prelude to the main event, which is called incubation. Night falls, and you are led to a special chamber called the abaton, a sacred space where no ordinary person was allowed to enter during the day. This is a big deal. The whole purpose of your trip. You lie down on a bed, probably a simple mat on the floor. And wait, the atmosphere is quiet, reverent, and maybe a little spooky. You're surrounded by other sick people, all hoping for the same thing. You're meant to sleep, but not just any sleep. You're supposed to dream. The Greeks believed that the god Asclepios himself, or his sacred snakes, a quirky tidbit you probably wouldn't expect, would appear to you in your dreams. The snake was a powerful symbol of healing and rebirth, shedding its skin to renew itself. If you were lucky, the god or one of his snakes would visit you in your dream and either provide a diagnosis, suggest a cure, or, in the most miraculous cases, heal you on the spot. A particularly famous mainstream historical fact about these temples is the story of Aristophanes of Messene, who suffered from headaches. He dreamt that Asclepios told him to wash his head with salt water for 3 days. He did, and his headaches disappeared. The next morning, you would report your dream to a priest, who would then help you interpret the message. If the dream was a bit vague, they might suggest a specific course of action, like taking a particular herbal concoction or changing your diet. This was a form of ancient medicine that blended spiritual belief with practical observation. Historians still argue whether the cures were truly divine or if the combination of purification, fasting, and the intense psychological power of belief was what actually led to the healing. Was it a miracle or an ancient placebo effect on a massive scale? We may never know, but the results were apparently compelling enough to keep these temples running for centuries. This wasn't just a simple visit, it was an immersive experience. The atmosphere was designed to be calming and therapeutic. The temples were often built in peaceful, beautiful locations, surrounded by nature and flowing water, which we now know are fantastic for stress reduction and, you guessed it, sleep. The whole process was designed to put your mind and body in a state of heightened receptivity. Your mind was primed for healing, and your sleep was the final, critical step in the journey. The snakes slithering around the temple grounds, a constant reminder of the god's presence and a surprisingly effective way to make sure no one slept too deeply. Just a gentle, slithery reminder that you're in a sacred space. Good luck with that. You're not just trying to get some shut-eye. You're trying to get a supernatural prescription, hoping for a dream that will change your life. As the influence of Greece waned, a new empire rose from the ashes, one of unparalleled power and engineering marvels. We're moving to ancient Rome, a place where the grandeur of the city was matched only by the complexity of its social life. You're no longer a humble pilgrim seeking a divine cure, you're a Roman citizen. And your day is a bustling mix of the forum, the baths, and the inevitable political intrigue. When night falls, your sleep is a reflection of the social stratification that defines your entire world. Unlike the Greeks, who saw sleep as a spiritual bridge, the Romans treated it with a more pragmatic, almost clinical, approach. It was a time for rest, yes, but also a time to prepare for the next day's duties, battles, or conquests. Your sleep environment is probably a lot different from what we've seen so far. If you're a wealthy Roman, you're sleeping in a large, well-appointed bed, a lectus cubicularis, in a dedicated bedroom. These beds weren't just for sleeping, they were pieces of furniture, often decorated with bronze or ivory inlays, and sometimes even inlaid with gold. They had mattresses filled with wool or even feathers, which were a luxury few could afford. You'd have sheets and blankets made from fine linen or wool. It's a far cry from a hard wooden headrest. You're living the high life, at least when it comes to bedtime. The Romans were also big on what we would call sleep hygiene. They believed a good night's rest was essential for a healthy body and a clear mind. The physician Galen, a mainstream historical figure, wrote extensively about the importance of sleep, connecting it to the balance of the body's humors. But if you're not so well off, your experience is entirely different. You're likely sleeping on a straw or reed mat on the floor of a crowded insula, a multi-story apartment building that was often rickety and prone to collapse. You'd share the room with your entire family and probably half the neighborhood's rats. The sounds of the city, which never truly seemed to sleep, would be a constant presence, the rumbling of carts, the shouting of late-night vendors, and the general cacophony of a massive metropolis. You had to be a very deep sleeper to get any rest in one of these. Historians still argue whether the Romans truly valued sleep or if their chaotic urban environments simply made a full night's rest a luxury that only the wealthy could afford. A quirky tidbit about Roman sleep is the fact that they didn't just use a single pillow. They had a variety of pillows for different purposes, a pulvinus for the head, and sometimes smaller cushions for the back or legs. They also had a specific type of pillow just for reclining at dinner parties, because, it's exhausting to eat grapes all night. They even had a goddess of sleep, Somnus, whose temple was a place where people would go to seek relief from insomnia. But this wasn't a pilgrimage for divine cures like the Greeks. It was a more practical appeal. A plea for simple, straightforward rest. The Romans were less interested in the spiritual side of dreams and more focused on the practical implications. Dreams were sometimes seen as omens, but often just as a result of a full stomach or a stressful day. They had dream interpretation, but it was less of a divine message and more of a common sense prediction. Dream about a fire? Maybe don't hang out near the bakery tomorrow. For the elite, sleep was a curated experience. They would have slaves fan them to keep them cool, and they might even have had special rituals to ensure a good night's sleep. The Romans were masters of blending practicality with luxury, and their approach to sleep was no exception. It was about comfort and control. You would have your servants prepare your bed, maybe even read to you to help you drift off. It was a stark contrast to the life of the average person, for whom sleep was a battle against noise, heat, and discomfort. But for both the rich and the poor, sleep was a necessity, a way to recharge for the next day's trials and triumphs. And you can bet that, rich or poor, nobody would use a stone headrest again after they invented the feather pillow. Leaving the grandeur of Rome behind, we cross the Atlantic, though not in any ship you'd recognize, and find ourselves in a world entirely new, the vibrant, complex civilizations of Mesoamerica. You are now an Aztec, living in the bustling city of Tenochtitlan, a marvel of engineering built on a lake. Your day is filled with market trading, religious festivals, and the constant hum of a society built on a delicate balance of cosmic forces. When night falls, your sleep isn't just about physical rest. It's a profound journey into the spiritual realm. A time when the veil between this world and the next is at its thinnest. The Aztecs viewed dreams not as messages from a distant god, but as active, personal journeys. They believed that during sleep, your soul, your tonali, could leave your body and travel to different planes of existence. This was a truly high-stakes kind of sleep. If your soul had a bad encounter, like running into a malevolent spirit, it could get trapped or wounded, leading to illness or even death in the waking world. No big deal, right? Just another thing to worry about before you close your eyes. This belief made the act of sleeping a kind of spiritual expedition, a nightly adventure into the unknown. For a quirky tidbit, the Aztecs had a specific ritual for dealing with a soul loss dream. If you dreamt that you were being chased by a predator or falling from a great height, a shaman might be called in to perform a ritual to coax your tonali back into your body. This often involved incantations, burning special herbs, and even a form of spiritual massage to help re-anchor your soul. It's a bit like an ancient, mystical version of a chiropractor. But for your spirit, this wasn't just a fringe belief, it was a mainstream historical fact. A core part of their medical and spiritual practices. Dreams were a diagnostic tool, a window into your soul's health. The physical act of sleeping was also different. You're not in a bed with a feather mattress. You're likely sleeping on a woven mat, a patate, on the floor. For the Aztecs, the most common form of rest wasn't a bed at all, but a hammock. This was a hugely popular way to sleep, providing ventilation in the humid climate and keeping you off the ground, away from insects and other critters. Sleeping in a hammock was a communal affair, often done with your entire family in the same room. It created a sense of security and togetherness, a stark contrast to the individual, private sleep of the Roman elite. This brings us to a scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Aztec practice of communal sleeping was primarily for safety and comfort or if it had a deeper cultural significance, fostering a stronger social bond and shared consciousness. It's easy to see how a culture that believed in shared spiritual journeys would also embrace shared physical rest. Your dreams weren't just your own, they were part of a collective narrative, a series of nightly voyages that shaped your community's understanding of the cosmos. So, as you lie in your hammock, gently swaying in the cool night air, you're not just resting, you're preparing for a journey. The night sky above you isn't just a collection of stars, it's a map of the spirit world. And your dreams are the compass. You might be visited by a god like Quetzalcoatl, who could offer you wisdom, or you might encounter a demon who could try to steal your soul. It's a far cry from dreaming about what to have for breakfast. Your sleep is a sacred, dangerous, and deeply meaningful part of your existence, a time when the boundaries of reality blur and your spirit takes flight. You just have to hope it remembers the way home. As our journey through time continues, we leave the vibrant, sun-drenched world of the Aztecs and cross back over the great ocean, landing not in the elegant cities of antiquity, but in the muddy fields and fortified castles of medieval Europe. You're no longer a Roman citizen or an Egyptian priest, you're a medieval peasant. And your life is a constant cycle of backbreaking labor, religious devotion, and the ever-present threat of famine or disease. When night falls, your sleep is a reflection of this harsh reality. It's broken, it's communal, and it's a far cry from the continuous 8 hours you might strive for today. This is a mainstream historical fact that might shock you. For much of the medieval period, people didn't sleep in one continuous block. They practiced what's now known as segmented sleep or biphasic sleep. The night was divided into two distinct phases. You'd go to bed shortly after sunset, maybe around 9 p.m., and sleep for what was called the first sleep, which would last for a few hours. Then, in the middle of the night, usually around midnight or 1 a.m., you'd wake up. This period of wakefulness, which could last an hour or more, was known as the wakeful interval or the middle of the night. During this time, you wouldn't just lie there staring at the ceiling. You'd get up. People would use this time for prayer, to tend to the fire, to visit with neighbors, or to even do some light work around the house. Some people might even get a little cheeky and have some adult time. It was a productive part of the night, a quiet period of reflection and connection. After this wakeful interval, you'd go back to bed for the second sleep, which would last until dawn. This pattern wasn't just a quirky tidbit of a few people, it was the norm. Deeply embedded in the culture, people didn't see waking up in the middle of the night as a sign of insomnia or a problem. It was just a normal part of life. We've all had those nights where we wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. And it feels like a total disaster. For them, it was just Tuesday. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern was a conscious choice or a necessity born of their environment. Was it because they had no artificial light and their sleep was naturally governed by the sun's cycle? Or was it a cultural practice that served a social and spiritual purpose? It's hard to say for sure. The lack of artificial light certainly played a role, as the darkness of night was profound and all-encompassing, making the waking period in the middle of the night a time of deep intimacy and contemplation. You couldn't watch TV or scroll through your phone. You just had to be with yourself and your thoughts. Your sleeping arrangements would also be a lot different. If you were a peasant, you'd likely be sleeping on a straw pallet on the floor, often with your entire family in the same room, sometimes even with your farm animals for warmth. Privacy was not a concept that existed. This communal sleeping arrangement was a practical way to conserve body heat during cold nights and was a sign of the close-knit, interdependent nature of their society. The wealthy might have had beds, but they were often large, four-poster affairs with heavy curtains, meant to be a status symbol as much as a place to sleep. But even they practiced segmented sleep. So, as you lie on your pallet in the cold, dark room, you're not just waiting for morning. You're waiting for the middle of the night. For that quiet time of wakefulness where the world slows down and you can just be. It's a different rhythm of life. A different way of experiencing the night. You're not trying to force yourself back to sleep. You're embracing the quiet pause in the middle of the dark. A brief respite before you trudge back to sleep and then to the fields. As we sleep our way forward through time, we leave the communal straw pallets of the Middle Ages behind and step into a new, more intellectually curious era, the Renaissance. You are now an artist, a philosopher, or a wealthy merchant in Florence or Venice, and your world is buzzing with a renewed interest in science, art, and the human body. This period, which spanned roughly the 14th to the 17th century, marked a significant shift in how people thought about sleep. It wasn't just a time for prayer or a chaotic necessity, it was a state of being that could be studied and understood. This is when the first glimmers of modern sleep science began to appear. The Renaissance wasn't a time of great technological innovation for sleep aids. But it was a period of incredible intellectual curiosity. You see doctors and scholars beginning to move away from purely spiritual explanations for sleep and dreams and towards more physiological ones. A mainstream historical fact is that physicians like Leonardo da Vinci and Andreas Vesalius, who were revolutionary in their detailed studies of human anatomy, started to view sleep as a bodily function. They were looking for the mechanics behind it, not just the spiritual meaning. Da Vinci, in particular, was obsessed with the body as a machine, and he made notes about how rest was essential for the machine to function properly. This wasn't a public, widespread movement, of course. For most people, sleep was still a practical matter. But for the intellectual elite, it was a puzzle. A quirky tidbit from this era is the belief that certain foods could influence your dreams. The famous physician and astrologer Marsilio Ficino wrote about how eating certain things, like cabbage or certain spices, could lead to strange or disturbing dreams. His advice was to eat light, simple meals before bed to ensure a peaceful night's rest, which, honestly, is still pretty solid advice today. He was connecting diet to the quality of sleep, a truly groundbreaking idea for the time. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance's focus on individual humanism and the development of the private bedroom led to the decline of segmented sleep. Did the new emphasis on personal space and the privacy of the home make the idea of waking up and mingling in the middle of the night less appealing? Or was it simply the slow but steady introduction of more and more artificial light, from candles to oil lamps, that blurred the natural divide of the night? It's a chicken and egg situation. As people gained more control over their environment, they began to gain more control over their sleep patterns. Your sleep environment, if you're a wealthy person in this era, is getting pretty luxurious. You're likely in a private bedroom, in a large, often ornately carved bed, with a mattress stuffed with wool or feathers, and draped with heavy fabrics to keep out the cold. You're starting to get what we would recognize as a modern bed. But even with all this luxury, the old habits die hard. The fear of bad dreams and the need for nightly prayer still existed. You might have had a small prayer book by your bedside, and your sleep was still, in many ways, a nightly reflection on your life and your soul. So, as you lie in your fancy new bed, you're part of a slow-moving revolution. You're still influenced by old traditions, but there's a new sense of curiosity in the air. The night is no longer just a dark, mysterious chasm between two days. It's a process, a biological function that is ripe for study. And this shift in thinking will, in time, lead to even bigger changes. It's a quiet revolution, a change not in the technology of sleep, but in the very idea of what sleep is. From the quiet, contemplative bedrooms of Renaissance Italy, we shift our focus dramatically. Traveling north to the cold, windswept shores of Scandinavia, you are now a Viking, a formidable figure with a keen sense of adventure and a healthy respect for the gods. Your life is not one of philosophical contemplation, but one of raiding, trading, and exploring, and your sleep reflects this rugged existence. This is a world where rest is a practical matter, often snatched in brief moments between battles and long, arduous journeys. A mainstream historical fact about Viking life is that they were expert seafarers, and a lot of their time was spent on longships. These ships were a marvel of engineering, but they weren't exactly designed for comfort. On these voyages, you'd sleep with your shield for a pillow, often with your fellow warriors packed in close for warmth and security. The rhythmic rocking of the ship, the creak of the wood, and the crash of waves would be your nightly lullaby. Sleep wasn't a private affair, it was a communal necessity, a time to recuperate for the next day's hard work. This communal sleeping arrangement extended to their homes as well. In a Viking longhouse, you'd find yourself sleeping on raised wooden platforms, often with your entire family and sometimes even your livestock sharing the same large, open hall. This brings up a quirky tidbit about Viking nap culture. They were masters of the short, restorative nap. When you're a warrior and a sailor, you learn to take advantage of any downtime you can get. A quiet afternoon in the mead hall might be a perfect time to catch a quick nap before the evening's festivities. The Vikings had a word for this, svefn, which simply meant sleep, but their culture was a testament to the idea of flexible rest. They weren't tied to a rigid schedule, they slept when they could, and they woke when they had to. Historians still argue about whether the Vikings' fierce warrior culture was a result of this flexible, often broken, sleep pattern, or if it was simply a necessity of their lifestyle. Did the lack of consistent, deep sleep make them more alert and ready for a fight at a moment's notice? Or were they just really tired all the time and learned to be really good at yelling about it? It's a fun thing to think about. Their entire society was built on adaptability, and their sleep was no different. You're not thinking about the physiological benefits of REM cycles or the balance of humors. You're thinking about survival. You're lying in your longhouse, the fire crackling in the center, the smoke of thick haze in the air, listening to the gentle snoring of your kin. You're resting, but your senses are still on high alert. The sleep of a Viking wasn't just about physical recovery, it was also a form of psychological preparation. It was a time to dream of Valhalla, of glorious battles, and of the gods, but it was also a time to be ready for the very real possibility of a raid or an attack. The Vikings also had a deep connection to the spiritual side of dreams. Much like other ancient cultures we've discussed, they believed dreams could be prophetic and that the gods might speak to them in their sleep. But unlike the Greeks or Egyptians, the interpretation of these dreams wasn't a job for a specialized priest. It was a personal responsibility. You were expected to be able to decipher the messages of the gods yourself. This self-reliance was a core part of their culture, and it extended to everything, even the mysterious world of sleep. You had to be your own dream interpreter, your own shaman, your own expert in the nightly world. No pressure, right? Just a little casual deciphering of the divine while you're trying to get some shut-eye. Our journey takes us high into the mountains of South America, to the sprawling empire of the Incas. You are now a citizen of a civilization that built magnificent cities in the clouds and created a road system rivaled by none. Your life is governed by the cycles of the sun and the moon. And your days are filled with farming, weaving, and communal work. For the Incas, sleep was deeply intertwined with their natural environment and social structure. It wasn't just a personal ritual, it was a communal experience that reflected the harmony and order of their society. A mainstream historical fact is that the Incas practiced a form of communal sleeping. It was common for entire families to sleep in one room, on raised platforms or beds made of wood, often covered with alpaca or llama wool blankets. This wasn't just for warmth in the high-altitude climate, it was a way of reinforcing the close-knit social fabric of their communities. Your rest was a shared experience, a quiet testament to the idea that you were never truly alone. This communal living and sleeping arrangement was central to their concept of Ilu, the basic social unit of the empire, which was based on kinship and cooperation. A quirky tidbit about Inca sleep is their practice of using a specific type of rock as a pillow. It was believed that sleeping on a smooth, rounded stone, warmed by the sun during the day, could absorb negative energy from the body and promote a more restful, healing sleep. They saw the earth itself as a source of energy and healing. And this was just one of many ways they integrated nature into their daily lives. You wouldn't have a memory foam pillow, you'd have a carefully selected, sun-warmed stone that felt like a little piece of the mountain was helping you rest. Historians still argue whether the high-altitude living of the Incas influenced their sleep patterns. Did the thinner air and colder temperatures lead to shorter, more fragmented sleep, or did their communal sleeping arrangements and reliance on nature-based remedies actually lead to a deeper, more restorative rest? It's a complex question. We know that high altitudes can affect sleep, but we also know that the Incas had a profound understanding of their environment and had developed countless ways to thrive in it. Their sleeping habits were likely a clever and nuanced adaptation. For the Incas, dreams were also a significant part of their spiritual life. They believed that dreams could be a form of communication from their ancestors or from the gods. Like Viracocha or Inti, the sun god, a particularly vivid dream might be interpreted as a sign of divine favor or a warning of an impending natural disaster. There wasn't a complex system of dream interpretation like in Mesopotamia. Instead, it was a more intuitive, personal practice, often shared with and discussed by the community. Your dream wasn't just your own, it was part of the collective story, a small piece of the puzzle of their lives. So, as you lie on your platform, under a blanket of soft alpaca wool, listening to the gentle breathing of your family, you're not just resting, you're connecting with your community, with your ancestors, and with the very earth itself. Your sleep is a quiet reaffirmation of your place in the universe. A moment of profound peace in the midst of a very structured and demanding life. It's a sleep that is both deeply personal and deeply communal. A perfect reflection of the Incan way of life. From the high, cold mountains of the Incas, we descend and journey across the Pacific, landing in the ancient, philosophical lands of China. You are now a Chinese scholar or peasant in a world where the balance of all things, known as yin and yang, governs not just the cosmos, but your own body and mind. For the Chinese, sleep wasn't just a simple act of rest, it was a critical component of maintaining this delicate balance. Your health, your longevity, and your spiritual well-being all hinged on getting your sleep right. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Chinese medical philosophy, which we know today as traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, saw sleep as a time for the body's energies to reset. During the day, the body's energy, or qi, was active and outward-facing, yang. At night, this energy was meant to recede inward and become passive, yin. A good night's sleep was a sign that this transition was happening correctly. If you had trouble sleeping, it wasn't just insomnia, it was a sign that your yin and yang were out of balance. Perhaps your yang energy was too strong or your yin energy was too weak, preventing your body from settling down. This holistic view led to a quirky tidbit: the belief that the direction you slept in mattered. For centuries, Chinese medical texts advised people to sleep facing a certain direction, often south or east, to align themselves with the Earth's magnetic field and the flow of natural energy. They believed this alignment could help the body's qi flow more smoothly, leading to a more restorative sleep. Sleeping in the wrong direction might cause restlessness or even illness. It's a very different approach from our modern focus on mattress firmness or pillow height. Your sleep environment, whether you were a scholar in a grand house or a farmer in a simple hut, would be shaped by these beliefs. You might sleep on a bed that was more like a raised platform, often with a mat on top. For the wealthy, this platform could be a beautiful piece of furniture, carved and lacquered. For the poor, it was a simple wooden surface. But the underlying philosophy was the same: your rest was part of a larger cosmic order. Historians still argue whether the practice of segmented sleep, which we saw in medieval Europe, was also common in ancient China. Some texts suggest a pattern of resting in the evening and again in the morning, with a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. Others suggest a more continuous sleep pattern. It's possible that different regions or social classes had different customs, but the idea of a night punctuated by a brief period of quiet contemplation was not alien to them. The Chinese also had a profound belief in the power of dreams. They saw dreams as a window into the subconscious and the spiritual world. Dream interpretation was a serious business, and there were many texts dedicated to deciphering the meanings of symbols that appeared in your sleep. Dreaming of a dragon, for example, might be a sign of great fortune and power, while dreaming of a snake could be a warning of impending danger. This practice of dream analysis wasn't just about predicting the future. It was about understanding your own mind and your place in the universe. It was a way to maintain the balance not just of your body, but of your soul. So, as you lie on your platform, facing the proper direction, you're not just trying to catch some Z's. You are actively participating in a cosmic dance, aligning your body and soul with the rhythms of the universe, and hoping for a night of balanced energy and peaceful dreams. It's a sleep that is both a physical necessity and a spiritual practice, a testament to the deep connection between the human body and the natural world. Leaving the structured cosmic balance of China, we make a short hop across the sea to the quiet, aesthetically rich islands of Japan. You are now a person living in a society deeply influenced by Zen Buddhism, where life is a practice in mindfulness and appreciation of the simple. Your relationship with sleep is not about cosmic balance or divine communication, it's about a quiet, mindful ritual that prepares you for a day of focused action and inner peace. A mainstream historical fact about traditional Japanese sleep is the use of the futon. This wasn't just a bed, it was a system of rest. The futon, which consists of a mattress, shikibuton, and a duvet, kakebuton, is placed directly on the floor, often on a woven straw mat called a tatami. The beauty of the futon is its simplicity and practicality. During the day, It can be folded and stored in a closet, freeing up the room for other activities. This reflected a core Japanese value of efficiency and multi-purpose living spaces. It also connected you directly to the floor, to the earth, a subtle but constant reminder of your place in the natural world. This brings us to a quirky tidbit, the art of the nap, or inamori. While the Vikings were taking naps out of sheer necessity, the Japanese practice of inamori is more about a quiet, respectful presence. It literally means to be present while sleeping. This is the act of napping in public places, like on a train or in a meeting, without it being seen as rude. Instead, it's often a sign that you are so dedicated to your work that you've exhausted yourself and need a brief moment of rest. It's a sign of commitment, not laziness. Imagine trying to explain that to your boss today. "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just showing my commitment to the company by sleeping through this presentation." Historians still argue whether this practice of inamori is a modern phenomenon or if it has deep roots in a culture that values long hours of work. Was it born out of the grueling schedules of industrialization, or is it a continuation of a more ancient tradition of flexible rest? It's likely a bit of both. A cultural adaptation to the demands of a fast-paced society. For the Japanese, the transition from day to night was a mindful one. It involved a quiet ritual of preparing your space, unrolling your futon, and readying your mind for rest. It wasn't about shutting down, it was about quieting the mind. The sounds of the night, the rustle of the bamboo outside, the soft hum of the city, were not things to be blocked out but things to be absorbed. This was a meditative approach to sleep, a way to find peace in the present moment, even as your body was preparing to rest. Dreams were also a part of this quiet contemplation. They weren't seen as omens or divine messages in the same way as in other cultures, but as reflections of your own mind. A vivid dream might be a sign that your subconscious was working through something, and the act of quietly reflecting on the dream the next morning was a way to gain insight into yourself. It was a form of self-discovery, a quiet conversation with your own mind. There were no priests or shamans to interpret your dreams. You were your own guide. So, as you lie on your futon, the cool floor beneath you, the gentle rustle of the wind outside, you're not just sleeping, you're participating in a quiet, mindful ritual that connects you to your home, to your ancestors, and to your own inner peace. It's a sleep that is both simple and profound, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most luxurious thing you can have is a quiet mind. Our journey through history brings us to a pivotal, and frankly jarring, moment in human history, the Industrial Revolution. This is a period of monumental change, a time when the world moved from agrarian societies to bustling, factory-filled cities. You are no longer a farmer or a warrior, you are a factory worker in England. And your sleep is about to be turned upside down. This is the moment when the natural rhythms of day and night, which had governed human sleep for millennia, were fundamentally broken. A mainstream historical fact is that the invention of artificial light, specifically gas lamps and later the electric light bulb, allowed for the first time in human history for work to continue around the clock. Factories ran 24/7, and workers were often forced to work in shifts, sometimes for 12 or even 16 hours at a stretch. This completely shattered the ancient practice of segmented sleep and the natural circadian rhythms that had been established over generations. You couldn't just wake up in the middle of the night and do some quiet contemplation, you had to get up and go to work. The night was no longer a time of quiet rest, it was another opportunity for labor. This created a society that was perpetually tired. The concept of catching up on sleep became a real and pressing issue. Sleep wasn't seen as a restorative process anymore, it was a luxury that often had to be sacrificed for economic gain. A quirky tidbit is that early factory owners would sometimes provide communal sleeping barracks for their workers, where men, women, and children would sleep in shifts, sometimes in the same bed as the previous occupant. It was a chaotic, unhygienic, and deeply dehumanizing system, a far cry from the peaceful, community-oriented rest of the Incas or the mindful rituals of the Japanese. Historians still argue whether the physical and mental health decline seen during the Industrial Revolution was primarily a result of the poor working conditions, the terrible diet, or the severe lack of sleep. It's almost impossible to untangle them, as they all worked in a vicious cycle. A person who was exhausted from a 16-hour shift was more likely to be injured on the job and more susceptible to illness. The lack of sleep was a public health crisis that was completely new to humanity. Your sleep environment, if you were a factory worker, would be a small, cramped room in a crowded tenement, filled with the sounds of the city and the constant hum of the factories. You might be sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor, sharing the space with your entire family. The darkness was no longer a comforting blanket, it was just a brief pause before the relentless cycle of labor began again. The light bulb, which we see as a symbol of progress and innovation, was also, in many ways, the first nail in the coffin of our natural relationship with sleep. It was a powerful tool that allowed us to conquer the night. But in doing so, we lost something fundamental. So, as you lie in your small, noisy room, trying to get a few hours of shut-eye before the factory whistle blows, you are witnessing the birth of a new, broken relationship with sleep. The night is no longer a spiritual journey or a time for quiet reflection. It is simply a waiting room for another day of work. You're part of a grand experiment, a society that has decided to ignore the natural rhythms of life in favor of relentless production. And the results are, well, you'll feel them in the morning. The Industrial Revolution may have broken our sleep, but it also spurred a quiet counter-revolution. We turn now to the object that, more than any other, defines our modern rest. The bed itself. You are now a person living in the late 19th or early 20th century. And the concept of a dedicated, comfortable, and private place to sleep is becoming a reality for more and more people. The bed, once a communal platform or a luxury for the elite, is transforming into a personal sanctuary. A mainstream historical fact is the invention and popularization of the coil spring mattress in the mid to late 19th century. Prior to this, mattresses were often sacks filled with straw, horsehair, feathers, or wool. They were lumpy, unhygienic, and a haven for critters. The spring mattress was a game changer. It provided a level of comfort, support, and cleanliness that was previously unimaginable. It allowed for a more consistent, restorative sleep, and it was a symbol of a new era of personal hygiene and comfort. The bed was no longer just a place to lie down. It was a piece of specialized equipment designed for the express purpose of sleep. This brings us to a quirky tidbit: the rise of the bed frame as a status symbol. As the mattress became more comfortable, the frame around it became a canvas for artistry and a display of wealth. Iron and brass bed frames, often with intricate scrollwork and finials, became a popular choice for the middle class. They were durable, easy to clean, and looked fantastic. You were no longer just sleeping, you were sleeping in style. The bed became a focal point of the bedroom, a room that itself was a new concept for many people who had previously shared their living and sleeping spaces with their entire family. Historians still argue whether the invention of the modern bed was a cause or a consequence of the new emphasis on private, individual sleep. Did the existence of a better bed encourage people to seek a more personal sleep experience? Or did the desire for a more personal experience drive the innovation of the bed? It's a classic case of demand and supply. As people moved into cities and away from the communal living of agrarian societies, the need for private space became more pronounced. The bed was the perfect tool to fulfill this need. For the first time in human history, the goal of sleep was becoming a solid, uninterrupted 8 hours. The idea of segmented sleep was fading into the mists of history, replaced by a new ideal: a long, continuous block of rest, a total shutdown of the body and mind. This was partly driven by the demands of the modern work week, which required people to be alert and productive for a solid 8 to 10 hour workday. You couldn't just wake up in the middle of the night and do some work. You had to be fresh for the morning commute. So, as you lie in your newly sprung mattress, in your private bedroom, you are participating in a quiet revolution. You are no longer sleeping on the floor, or with your family, or with a stone under your head. You are sleeping in a bed, a symbol of progress, privacy, and personal comfort. It is a testament to how far we have come, and a hint of the challenges that are yet to come. The bed is here, but the perfect night's sleep is still a journey we're on. From the dawn of the spring mattress, we now step back in time, and also out of the mainstream narrative, to the world of indigenous cultures. These are not societies with factories or spring mattresses, but people whose lives are deeply connected to the land and the rhythms of nature. Their sleep is not a conquest of the night but a surrender to it. A practice that offers profound lessons for our modern, often disconnected lives. A mainstream historical fact, though one often overlooked, is the concept of sleep as a communal, nature-aligned experience. For many indigenous cultures across the globe, sleep was a time of heightened awareness, not a total shutdown. You might sleep in a communal lodge or a shared hut, surrounded by the gentle sounds of your family and the natural world outside. Your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm, wasn't fighting against a 24/7 world. It was working in perfect harmony with the rising and setting of the sun and the cycles of the moon. This was a sleep that was not just about individual rest but about a collective surrender to the natural order. This brings us to a quirky tidbit: the belief that the dreams of children were particularly sacred. In some Native American tribes, the dreams of a child were believed to be powerful messages from the spirit world. The child's dream would be discussed by the elders, who might find a new song, a new name, or a new direction for the community. The dreams of children were not seen as random fantasies but as a pure, unfiltered connection to the cosmic forces. This gave children a respected voice in the community, a role that was deeply intertwined with their sleep. Historians still argue whether the more consistent and often healthier sleep patterns seen in indigenous societies were a result of their nature-aligned lifestyle, the lack of artificial light, or the communal, social aspect of their rest. It's hard to isolate one factor, as they all work together. The lack of screen time, the physical labor during the day, and the deep connection to a peaceful environment all created a perfect storm for a deeply restorative rest. They didn't need a sleep tracking app. Their bodies and their environment were their guides. For these cultures, sleep was also a time for stories. Many indigenous traditions have a rich oral history, and some of the most powerful stories were told in the quiet hours before sleep. These weren't just bedtime stories, they were lessons, myths, and histories passed down from one generation to the next. The act of listening to these stories in the darkness, with the crackle of the fire and the sounds of the night, was a form of meditation, a way to quiet the mind and prepare for a night of rest. This was a form of sleep hygiene that was both social and spiritual, a way to cleanse the mind before the body shut down. So, as you listen to a story being told in the darkness, surrounded by your community, you are experiencing a sleep that is both ancient and timeless. It's a sleep that is not just a personal event but a communal one. A time to reconnect with your family, your history, and the natural world. It is a sleep that reminds us that sometimes the best way to rest is not to fight the night, but to embrace it, just as our ancestors did for thousands of years. So, we arrive at the present day, a world of endless artificial light, digital distractions, and a paradox of choice when it comes to sleep. You've traveled through ancient lands and jarring revolutions, and now you find yourself back in your own bed, with a memory foam mattress, a fluffy pillow, and a smartphone that is simultaneously a sleep tracker and a relentless source of blue light emitting distraction. This is the modern sleep paradox. We have more tools and knowledge than ever before to achieve a perfect night's rest. Yet we are more sleep deprived as a society than at any other point in history. We have lost, and in many ways, forgotten, the ancient wisdom of sleep. A mainstream historical fact is the concept of a dedicated, continuous 8-hour sleep cycle, a pattern that is a relatively new invention, born out of the Industrial Revolution's demands for a rigid workday. We've come to believe that anything less than this is a failure, and anything more is lazy. We have created a new set of rules for rest, a set of rules that our bodies, which evolved over millennia with segmented, nature-aligned sleep, are not always equipped to follow. The anxiety of not getting a perfect 8 hours can often be the very thing that prevents us from getting any sleep at all. This brings us to a quirky tidbit: the growing popularity of sleep tourism. People are now traveling to special resorts, often in remote, nature-filled locations, to learn how to sleep again. These places often strip away the distractions of modern life: no phones, no screens, no artificial light, and reintroduce ancient practices, like a connection to the natural world, a mindful wind-down routine, and a focus on diet and meditation. It's a hilarious and sad irony that we have to pay to go on vacation to relearn how to do something our ancestors did for free. Historians still argue whether our modern obsession with sleep technology, From apps that track our every toss and turn to devices that promise to lull us to sleep with white noise, is actually helping or hindering our rest? Are these tools empowering us? Or are they creating a new form of performance anxiety, where we feel we must win at sleep? It's a question that we are all, in our own ways, trying to answer every night. The truth is, we don't have to travel to a fancy resort or buy an expensive gadget to reclaim some of the wisdom of our ancestors. We can take a page from the Incas and embrace communal rest. Sharing a quiet moment with our loved ones before bed, we can learn from the ancient Chinese and find our own balance of yin and yang by creating a mindful wind-down ritual. We can even take a cue from the Japanese and learn the art of the intentional nap. A brief moment of restorative rest that can reset our entire day. The keys to a good night's sleep are not hidden in a factory or an app. They are in our own minds, in our own bodies, and in our own connection to the natural world. So, as you get comfortable now, and as you prepare to close your eyes, don't worry about getting a perfect 8 hours. Don't worry about your sleep score. Instead, just try to surrender to the night. Turn off the screen, dim the lights, and remember that the night is not a chasm to be conquered, but a quiet, ancient friend waiting to offer you rest.